Hello everyone, this is Fine from Awesome Tech Gaming Pro. I hope you all are well. Today I'm going to talk about the brand new 1918 humongous Samsung Q80C TV. Samsung's 1918 Q80C is by far the biggest TV since a Panasonic 103-inch plasma was lifted into place in this house. The fact that it's taken so long for me to find myself back in front of such a TV behemoth is a sorry symbol of how slow progress has been in making such massive screens more mainstream. This proof is precisely what makes Samsung's Q80C so interesting. But as well as being monumentally mammoth, it's also part of a Samsung mid-range TV series rather than being priced in the 5 or even 6-figure stratosphere. Right now, I want to stress that however much you might stand in front of king-size TVs like 19-inch Q80C on vast showroom floors at heavy industry events, while bigger is always better from this home cinema perspective, though in particular maintaining at such vast screen sizes the same sort of picture quality, especially with relatively affordable LCD technologies, you might get on a 65 or 75-inch screen is challenging to say the least. Issues such as pixel pitch, unless the screen is 8K, and the need for backlighting systems to work across so much screen actually can and do present makers of king-size TVs with some major challenges. If you are new in my channel, then please subscribe and press the bell icon for future notifications and upcoming videos. I have another channel named Tech Gaming Villa, where I upload similar kind of tech videos like TV comparison, sound system, home theater. You can check and subscribe. As a first step to nailing down how well the 19-inch Q80C handles these challenges, let's drill down into its key specifications, starting with the fact that it's a 4K that weight TV and is built on panel tech that places it roughly in the middle of Samsung's 2023 QLED TV series, which means more specifically that it sits at the top of Samsung's range of non-mini LED quantum dot color TVs, with those so-called Neo QLED mini LED models only kicking in from the Q85C upwards. When the extra light control and precise mini LED TVs might well have helped the 98 Q80C in its battle against the heat whose king-sized LCD screens can face, though it doesn't at least use a direct cooler panel design with local dimming, where different zones of its LEDs can be set to output different light levels with any given frame, independent of other LED zones. Samsung describes the 19-inch Q80C's dimming engine as supreme Ultra HD dimming, which despite how grand it sounds, actually sits a step down from the top-level ultimate Ultra HD dimming engine Samsung saves for models that have the highest number of dimming zones, a status that boils down to a total dimming zone count on the 98-inch Q80C of 120. I can hear the sharp intakes of breath from here. Surely some will shout in a year where we have seen much smaller TVs, including from Samsung, sporting literally 100 more dimming zones than the Q80C carries. 120 just isn't going to be enough to deliver a great picture on a 98-inch screen, even before getting into the Q80C's performance, though I would counter this argument by saying that there's been plenty of far evidence over the years to show that while having gazillions of dimming zones can certainly class as good a start, it's not the all and end all of a great TV picture. To abuse a common phrase, it's not always the number of dimming zones you have that counts, but what you do with them. It will surely help the 19-inch Q80C's light control that it uses a VA type of LCD panel rather than an IPS one. IPS panel can offer slightly wider effective viewing angles, but find it notoriously difficult to control the amount of light that seeps through them during dark scenes. 19-inch Q80C to deliver a more vibrant color palette capable of handling more brightness without tones and shades starting to look thin. Talking of brightness, I measured the Q80C to be capable of delivering a peak brightness of 1173 nits on a wide HDR window covering 10% on otherwise black screen. This was achieved in dynamic mode with the TV's local dimming set to high. Not that I would recommend that anyone actually use the dynamic preset for real-world viewing. It's designed basically for in-store conditions, not your living room. Happily, the other much more effective standard movie and filmmaker mode sets all turned in figures comfortably above 1000 nits on the same 10% window. Brightness dropped around 300 nits with each of the most useful 3 presets using a 1% wide window. A pretty natural result of a 98-inch TV driven by 120 local dimming zones, which is worth mentioning too given the Q80C's clear desire to offer a viable cut price alternative to king-sized OLED TVs that it achieves between 700 and 770 nits across the picture preset board with a full-screen white HDR signal. That's nearly twice as bright as even the latest premium OLED TVs can go with full-screen bright images. I couldn't help but wonder how much brighter Samsung might have been able to go with the Q80C if it wasn't having to work within the EU's latest draconian TV power consumption regulations. The TV ships in a dark-looking eco preset, and I would recommend you switch away from right away before you then also turn off ambient light, adaptive picture controls tucked away in the eco section of the general TV menu. And Samsung has hinted that the new EU rules really have been a challenge. There's not really much point dealing on hypotheticals at this point, though, and anyway, actually the sort of brightness figures I got out of the 98-inch Q80C actually look perfectly respectable for a mid-range model. All of the Q80C's picture elements are powered by Samsung's Neural Quantum 4K processor. This is the same one found on Samsung's 4K mini LED premium TVs with an added bonus, a new supersized picture enhancer that apparently uses AI-driven techniques to deliver upscaling, noise reduction, sharpness, and black enhancement techniques, specially optimized for the TV's colossal images. As ever with a king-sized screen, the most important question once you have decided you can handle one is how much it's going to cost. And here I think the news is pretty exciting. In the US, you can pick up a 98-inch Q80C for a cent under $8,000 US. In fact, at the time of this video, the $7,000 US at via limited time promotion. Now the price may reduce, I hope. While in the UK, the set is currently going for €6,500. 55-inch Q80C is available for €2,800 in the UK and $2,500 US in the US. So while the 98-inch Q80C is remarkably cheap by 98 to 100-inch TV standards. So while, as I have said, the shift up to 98 inches is transformative in terms of experience it delivers, it is still better be sure you really want that extra home cinema going over above the 85-inch Q80C before you get your order in. Let's talk about its picture quality. Since it's the area where a bright king-sized LCD TV with local dimming is most likely to struggle, let's keep this assessment of its Q80C's picture performance with its handling of black levels, contrast, and backlighting right away. I was seriously impressed by how deep the 98-inch Q80C's black levels can get. There's hardly any general low contrast grayness hanging over scenes, and respect with only 120 zones working 98-inch screen. Even in a blacked out room, black levels look remarkably and consistently convincing, especially for reasons I will detail later when using the standard preset. Even more surprising than the simple depths of black the Q80C can hit, though, is how consistent and natural these black levels are. Also though, and perhaps most importantly of all, in the standard picture preset, at least backlight blooming is unfeasibly well suppressed even with high dynamic range content, particularly the stuff for locally dimmed LED TVs handle, such as the torch that glows through George's pocket in Andy Muschiett's first. It feels as he retrieves the wax for his boat from the dark cellar, and the constant aggressively mastered mix of light and dark areas during the first mansion party that opens Babylon happen on the Q80C in standard mode with only the faintest traces of blooming. So you don't really notice the jumping between dimming zones that George's torch moving can cause, but the limited stray light creeping into them is certainly welcome, given how particularly distracting it can be. A technical of mine with most, if not all, Samsung's otherwise excellent QLED local dimming TVs, mini LED as well as standard LED is that they're so focused on avoiding backlight blooming that they can at times take quite a chunk of light out of small bright objects that appear against dark background. With the Q80C though, this sort of high-level dimming is surprisingly minimal. Again, a possible unexpected benefit of Samsung's local dimming engine actually having fewer zones per inch to balance light across. You might have become alarmed by all my talk of the standard picture preset delivering the best blooming control, and as a result, black levels rather than the ostensibly more accurate movie and filmmaker mode preset. There's still no denying though that both of those non-standard presets make the workings of the Q80C's dimming engine much more noticeable. There's markedly more evidence too of light blooming into the black bars above and below wide ratio films in the movie and filmmaker mode presets than there is in standard. The slightly strange thing about the difference in backlight clouding between the standard and movie filmmaker presets is that I couldn't precisely replicate the standard mouse wizards by playing around with Q80C's local dimming and contrast enhancer settings. It's as if some of the different preset modes backlight behavior has been placed out of reach in the TV's service menus. For instance, if when using the movie preset, I switched the contrast enhancer option to low from its more aggressive default setting. Going back to appeal of the 90-inch Q80C's standard picture preset with HDR content, which is always accompanied by wide color gammas. Its relatively punchy approach to color also typically works very well, giving images a bit more punchy and vibrancy than you get with the movie and filmmaker mode. The movie mode tends to leave color looking a little jaundiced unless you put the time into calibrate this inflection out. So most people will find themselves looking at a choice between the standard and filmmaker modes depending on how aggressively a particular source has been mastered. If understandably you don't really want to have to judge from the title which 90-inch Q80C picture preset is the best one to go for and would rather have just one setting that works well for everything, then I would actually recommend using the standard preset as your starting point and slightly toning down its color saturation rather than starting with the filmmaker mode and trying to solve more fundamental clouding problems. If you are lucky enough to still have a few $100s or pounds left after forking out for a 90-inch Q80C despite it being only a mid-range TV in specification terms, it still has a wide enough range of color and light controls to make a professional calibration possible. Though I would hope a calibrator would take these monster panels quite specific characteristics into accounts rather than perhaps just slavishly following every calibration number. It's worth saying on the back of all discussion of the Q80C's mostly impressive backlighting and color performance that its picture also looked engagingly bright with HDR sources. This applies to both the general look of fully stained bright content but also, as noted earlier, the punch of small bright highlights in both mostly dark and mostly bright HDR images. I mentioned back near the start of this review that screens as big as the 90-inch Q80C are the best argument for HD resolution, and it is indeed the case that if you get close enough to 4K Q80C screen within around 2 meters, you start to become aware of visible pixel structure, especially with bright shots. Unless you are the sort of person who always has to sit on the front row at the cinema though, I wouldn't imagine that most 90-inch Q80C buyers will want to sit closer to it than the 3 meter Samsung recommends. And at that distance, aside from some very marginal jaggedness when presenting bright out edges, it feels more like the screen's enormity is helping to get more value out of sharpness and detailing of good quality 4K resolution sources than like it's stretching 4K to a point where you start to feel strongly aware of its non-8mm. Having tested one or two high-end 85-inch HD TVs, I would say those can deliver a denser, slightly more three-dimensional looking image, especially with native 8K content, if you are able to find any. Anyone worrying though that a 98-inch 4K TV might somehow look soft or bitty with 4K content is fading over nothing provided they watch from a sensible viewing distance. The standard preset, which for reasons discussed already, I found myself drawn to on the QTC slightly over sharpness pictures in its default setting, causing some glowing double edging around high contrast edges. We can resolve this though just by nudging the sharpness setting down a few notches. With native 4K still disappointingly rare in the broadcast world, it's great to find the AI-driven upscaling system the QTC applies to HD sources exceeding expectations, remapping HD content to the screen's much higher pixel count without the results looking soft, noisy, or off-color. The quality gap between upscaled HD and native 4K is a little more noticeable at this sort of scale than it is on 55 and 65-inch TVs. But the difference is far less extreme than expected. Standard definition broadcasts look a bit soft when blown up to 98 inches, but this is pretty much inevitable really, and I would like to think that most people spending thousands of pounds on a massive TV like the Q80C will be set up with a good roster of HD and ideally 4K sources. It's hardly fair to blame the 98-inch Q80C for exposing the failing of others though. This Q80C is just brutal about revealing what's in a source, which for the most part is exactly what AV fans want from a TV. The nice sharpness and clarity of the Q80C's pictures holds up well when a source contains camera pans or moving offsets, provided anyway that you make sure you turn off the auto mode for the TV's picture clarity settings, which causes too much soap opera effect and routinely throws up lots of distracting unwanted processing effects. So what's your thought about this 98-inch QTC TV? Please write in the comments below. That's it from now.